Ever wondered what getting hitched was really like 300 years ago? Forget everything you've seen in period dramas. Marriage in the 1700s was a whole different world, and honestly, it was less about romance and way more about, well, business. Let's start with the basics. In the 18th century, marriage wasn't so much a union of two hearts as it was a union of two families, two fortunes, and two futures. It was a strategic alliance, the most important economic and social contract a person would ever enter into. For the upper classes, it was about consolidating wealth and power. For the lower classes, it was about survival. A strong partner meant an extra pair of hands to work the farm or run the shop. Now let's talk about gender roles because they were rigid. Like set in stone rigid. Once a woman married, her legal identity basically vanished. Under a legal principle called coverture, a married woman became one with her husband. He was the head, she was the body. He controlled everything, her property, her earnings, her legal rights. She couldn't sign contracts, sue someone in court, or even write a will without his permission. Men were expected to be the providers and the public face of the family. Women were expected to be the domestic managers, the mothers, the obedient wives. Her domain was the home, his was the world. And what about getting to the altar? You couldn't just show up. A crucial part of the deal was the dowry. This was the property or money a bride brought into a marriage. It could be land, cash, livestock, or even household goods. For the wealthy, dowries were enormous and the subject of intense negotiation. Think of it like a prenup. But instead of protecting your assets, it was the price of admission. No dowry, or a small one, could seriously limit a woman's marriage prospects. Once married, that dowry technically belonged to her husband to manage, though it was supposed to support her if he died. Religion and law were completely intertwined with marriage. In places like England, the Church of England dictated the rules. You needed to have the banns read, that is a public announcement of your intention to marry, on 3 consecutive Sundays. This was to make sure no one had any legal objections like one of you already being married. Clandestine marriages did happen. Think eloping to places like Gretna Green in Scotland where the laws were more relaxed, but they were scandalous. Marriage was a public, legally binding, and divinely sanctioned institution. So how old were people when they got married? Probably older than you think. While aristocratic girls might be married off in their late teens, the average age for most people was actually in their mid to late 20s. Why? Because you had to be economically stable enough to start your own household. A man needed to finish his apprenticeship or inherit land, and a woman needed to accumulate a dowry. Once married, families were large, but tragically, child mortality was incredibly high. It wasn't uncommon for a woman to give birth to 10 or 12 children, with only half of them surviving to adulthood. What if it all went wrong? Was divorce an option? Barely. A full divorce, one that let you remarry, was almost impossible to get. It required an act of parliament in England and was astronomically expensive, so it was an option only for the very, very rich and powerful, and usually only for men. A wife's adultery was grounds for divorce. A husband's was not unless it was combined with something else like extreme cruelty or desertion. More common was separation, either informally or through a legal agreement. But even then, the woman was left in a very vulnerable position, with few rights and little financial support. And of course, all this varied by where you lived. In the American colonies, for instance, the frontier reality often meant traditions were a bit more relaxed. Dowries might be less formal, and a partner's practical skills were prized above all else. But the fundamental principles, the economic basis, the patriarchal structure, and the legal dominance of the husband were pretty much universal across the Western world. So next time you watch a historical romance, remember the reality behind the fantasy. Marriage in the 1700s was a complex, pragmatic, and often harsh arrangement. It was a world where love was a lucky bonus, not a requirement, and your entire life was defined by the contract you signed on your wedding day.